Very impressive to see you all. And of course, as Anita said, I want to thank her. I've been connected with her for many years, and her son, Sulman Raza, I'm sure you all know, was instrumental in our national championship in golf in 2016, and was an impressive student athlete for us as well. I don't recognize most of you. I do recognize, however, Randy Bernstein, who was the South principal for a while, and I'm apologizing to him that he had my kids as he went through there. But the good news is they do grow up. My son is at Northern Arizona University finishing a master's, and my daughter is at Berkeley finishing her undergraduate degree. But lucky for her, she's in study abroad in New Zealand. So she has no COVID, so she's been able to do pretty much what she wants to do over there. But Randy, it's good to see you on here as well. I am going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Oregon athletics right now, but I want to give you some context a little bit about where we kind of have come from. This obviously isn't my favorite year in Oregon athletics. I can't imagine it would be anybody's favorite year in Oregon athletics, but for all of you that have been part of this community for many years, I'm going into my 24th year as executive director or director of academic support for student athletes. And, as that during that time, certainly been probably the best years of Oregon athletics in the last 20 plus years that we've seen here, not just in terms of the facilities that have been built, but also in terms of the success that our student athletes have had. And I just feel very fortunate to have gotten to participate in their lives in the little ways that I get to as an advisor and as the director of academic support. So I'll start off with just a few things that are from way back. So my first student that I advised at the University of Oregon, his name was Justin Wilcox. And Justin Wilcox is now the head coach at Cal. So, and on his staff is Peter Sermon, who was also one of my students way back when. It makes me feel old when I tune into the Pac-12 network or somewhere and I see Justin Wilcox on the sideline running the Cal football program, thinking about the fact that he was an anthropology major. And I'm just going, he was always asking me, well, what am I going to do with an anthropology major? And I said, well, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things you could do with an anthropology major, but little did I know that coaching football at Cal was not one that came to my mind when he was a safety in the Oregon secondary. So I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of students and a lot of student athletes, and it's what's really been impressive and I think speaks well of the University of Oregon and this community is how connected those student athletes are and how much they give back. Our women's basketball program this last year, Sabrina and Ruthie and Satu, and I could go on and on, those girls, we had great men's basketball program last year. Football has been fantastic. Golf, just all of our programs have really in the last, while I've been here, been really fantastic. They've been fantastic competitively, but that's not what has impressed me. What's impressed me is how connected a lot of those athletes are with this community and the kind of connection they feel to this community. So, that piece of it, I think, is unique. And I meet once a week with directors of academics for the Pac-12. And they are a great group of people, but I don't feel like their athletes are as connected to the community that they are in or have come from where they are, whether that's Arizona State or Washington State, whatever. We do a unique job here, not just the university, but the athletic department, in really, I think, connecting our students to the community and then to the broader kind of world that they're in. So couple of just a couple of people that I've worked with that I think is interesting to see where the connections go. The former associate AD here, Dave Hickey, is now the director, at the University of Arizona. Mike Marlowe, who was here as an associate AD, is director of athletics at Northern Arizona University. Bill Moose, who used to be athletic director, is athletic director at Nebraska. Of course, Chip Kelly is head coach at UCLA, and he has Don Pelham down there, who's on the coaching staff here. Scott Frost, Nebraska. I'd already talked about Justin Wilcox, but you could go on with the connections of coaches and athletes and former people that have been here that have gone on to great success other places. And I also think that speaks broadly of the athletic department and the university. So in terms of academic support, though, I want to talk about what we normally do when there isn't a pandemic, just quickly. And that way you'll understand how dramatically things have changed this year and kind of how we've had to retool our support. Normally for our student athletes, when we're in person, and I hope that many of you have gotten a chance to see the Jaqua Center, which is the glass building that's on campus at the corner of Agate and Franklin there. But normally we have about 1,750 hours of tutoring a week in the building. That's 8 hours a week for all of our freshmen and incoming students. And then we have a GPA breakdown for the other students that are in there. And we provide one-on-one tutoring support for those student athletes. We have about 70 tutors that we employ that are mostly undergraduates, juniors and seniors that do well in their majors. They're graduate students. And we have some retired teachers that are part of that staff. We have 4 graduate students that help out with that. And then a staff of about 21 that includes learning specialists, advisors, and support staff members there. The Jaqua also has a coffee shop. I don't know if you've been in there. It's closed right now, but the coffee shop is closed in there. So we try and be connected as much as we can on connecting in terms of having the community be able to come into the building and use the building, and as well as the athletes feel comfortable in that space for their academic support. So what's obviously changed in the last year has been fairly dramatic. I was on a trip with our baseball team last February, or end of last February, early March, I guess it was, and in Arizona. And I flew back and I was headed to the Pac-12 championship game, Pac-12 championships for men's basketball when all of this started. And of course, at that point, we went into an entirely virtual support of all of our student athletes that really is consistent with what we're doing here today. And that is meeting in these little boxes and trying to encourage them to, do their work through this medium, which is quite different than we normally operate. So we retooled last spring, and we really used the same format that we used for in-person tutoring for our athletes in this platform. What we are finding is that we have a lot of our athletes that are, not faring as well in this space because they get Zoom fatigue. They have a hard time with 8 hours, of tutoring in this space, as well as all the other stuff that they have in their lives. So I think it's been a challenge to try and make that work. Currently, our tutoring services are online like this, but we are trying to use a more focused approach in providing that service so that we identify and target really what their needs are. So, having said that, there's also been some obvious changes in the year in terms of competition. As all of you, I'm sure, are aware, we finally have the kind of go-ahead from Oregon Health Authority and from the state of Oregon to start some athletic competitions this fall. Football is currently practicing each day, and they're tested prior to going onto the field. They have a rapid test that they take before they practice each day on the field. They have a 7-game schedule, and they're allowed to compete. Men's and women's basketball is in the same boat right now in terms of their ability to practice, and they will be competing at the end of November, early December, with hopefully some non-conference stuff that will not have any fans, and neither will football at this point. So that also has kind of changed a little bit about our support, in that we're shuffling and trying to make sure that we're working around those practice times that got modified really during the beginning of fall term here. So let me see. I want to say 2 other things, and then I'd be happy to answer questions that people might have about the academic sport, or if there's something specific that you want me to address. I don't know, Anita, beyond the academic support, I'm happy to do that. 2 things that I want to talk about are just the overwhelming kind of support from the athletic department, even though this has been a very tough time for our athletic department. The loss of all of the, particularly football this year is going to, put the athletic department about $65 million in debt, which is a huge hole given. Given what our normal operating budget is about 120 million, 110 to 120 million. So these 7 games that football are playing are important, but I think that Rob would tell you as well, goes beyond the revenue, and really has been a focus on student athlete welfare and really trying to do the things that are right to have a kind of holistic experience for the student athlete that includes not only what we can provide in terms of academic support and classroom experience on campus, as well as for them to be able to participate in some way in their sport now, given the new world that we live in. And I would say it's unprecedented, but it's not. It's precedented. This is the new normal. This is how we live and how we run our lives. So anyway, I'll stop there. And Anita, is there anything else that you wanted me to touch on before I just answer any questions that people might have?
Well, I was impressed at when our athletic director was talking about what student athletes have to do to be able to play. All of the restrictions related to COVID, And it sounded quite reasonable that they'll be able to do it. And I was wondering if you could give us an update. Are students adhering to those restrictions? Because I know one thing about student athletes, they want to play and they'll go along with anything to enable them to play. And is that what's actually happening? That they're not getting together in big parties and they're wearing a mask in public and other restrictions that Rob Mullins was telling us about?
So yes, to answer your question, I think they are complying pretty well with the with the guidelines and restrictions that we have in place. They're college students, so at some level, I want to say yes, but I wouldn't. There is some truth to the fact that that all college students at some level are young, and what they do when they're in our facilities is one thing, and what they do when they're in the parking lot or at their apartment is another. And I think we really have been working very hard to try and educate them to so that they understand really what the stakes are for when they make choices in particularly in this environment for going out or doing something that falls outside the boundaries of what would allow them to play. And we do have some athletes that have tested positive. And if anything, I would say the thing that's helped, and this is a horrible thing to say, but that's helped the kind of restrictions be more seriously adhered to are the fact that they've seen some of their teammates get sick and quarantine. And so, when we have a student athlete that tests positive, all of the roommates that are with that student athlete also have to quarantine at the same time. And so that means 14 days of no athletic activity, 14 days of being in your apartment, without being able to go outside. And, so those things I think have really, put the onus on the student athletes to be much more careful in how they approach their their business outside of the athletic department and outside the Jaqua Center. I do want to say the Jaqua Center is open. We have 90 of our student athlete freshmen are taking course in there in 3 different sections of our student athlete development class. So there's on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3 sections of 30 student athletes are in the building for a 50-minute course in there, massed up in our lecture hall that's 114 seat and spread out, and that has worked well. In addition to the fact that our student athletes are able to text a number that allows them to get a tutor room anytime they want that the building's open, so they can come in and study in the center. Now, our support is online, so our tutoring and our learning specialist support is all through this platform, but they do come in and use the building that way. So.
Okay, I think we can open it up.
Sure.
You just call people like
Glenn.
Glenn,
yeah. You're on mute, Glenn. Try again. There you go.
You're still muted, Glenn.
Still muted, Glenn.
There you go.
I know Grace did that to me behind my back. So thank you for coming. After they test positive for COVID, how many negative tests do they have to have before they can go back to playing?
So my understanding is they have to have 3 negative tests after they've had or become positive with COVID. So after their time having COVID, they have to have 3 negative tests.
Okay. Has there been any attempt to evaluate athletes who have tested positive, then test negative and go back, about the long-term effects of COVID?
Well, Dr. Craig Davidson and our not just him, but the Pac-12 are very focused on some of the I guess they call them comorbidities that go along with COVID, you know, the cardiovascular issues and some of the other kinds of issues that go along with, they are studying and looking at, and they do, we test all of our athletes that whether they are positive or negative, they're all tested regularly for their cardiovascular health. So that's a big part of it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Randy.
So, I know that there's been various, with the cancellations in the spring of seasons and everything, there have been agreements where what would have been seniors can come back and compete for another year. They're scholarship players. I'm wondering, how does that go with the whole, with the quota or whatever you want to call it for scholarship players? If we're holding on to scholarships that would have expired while we're looking for new ones coming in, how's that whole process? Have the limits been changed? How does it change recruiting?
Mm-hmm. So first answer to your question is all the limits were on all the spring sports were changed, so that baseball, track and field, any student athlete who lost their season of competition in the spring was able to come back on scholarship, and those were additional scholarships to the normal standard scholarships that were part of those springs. The same thing is happening in the fall here with football and the fall sports. So football, soccer, the other fall sports that are going on are also, those scholarship totals will increase for 1 year. And then after that, things will have to go back down to whatever the original, which is in football, it's 108 scholarship players. So, and so it has affected recruiting, and it has affected, certainly how a lot of the players themselves look at their role on the roster. I'll just give you an example. Our baseball roster is normally 35. It's 50 right now. And so, things like playing time and, where do I fit in on this team? And, are still questions that are being answered, because, and that's true of football too.
Were those decisions about limits, was that nationwide NCAA or was that Pac-12 or?
So this was a Pac-12 conference decision that was then confirmed by the NCAA. Yes. So both.
The other conferences, major conferences, pretty much done the same, or?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the biggest kind of factor right now that is really causing an interesting twist in everything is this name, image, and likeness rulings, and now legislation that's going on. And that is that as of this year, student athletes are able to profit from their name, image, and likeness as collegiate athletes, which has not been the case. And so there's a couple of rulings that happen that really, I think, are important to kind of figure out very quickly in the next, probably year, for everything from recruiting to exactly how that monetization is going to happen. And all of that has not been decided yet. One of the things that has happened is in the court rulings is that we are able to give essentially about $5,000 more to each student athlete that's being recruited here. $5,000 more in terms of their, academic, for their academic use. In other words, you could give that as a cash award, which is the latest ruling, and that has really caused some grief amongst conferences in how that's going to work, because not every conference just has that kind of money to to give out to athletes as either as a cash bonus for their academics, or for so they can actually profit from their name, image, and likeness, but they can also, under this other new ruling, they have the ability to get $5,000 more on top of their scholarship. And so none of that stuff is completely worked out yet, but I think that's the biggest wild card in probably the next 10 years going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to interrupt. I think
sorry.
maybe
Yep.
some people will want to stay and ask you more questions if you